Why would someone shoplift based on their personal pathology? They're shoplifting because they're desperate.
Not necessarily. Like, so we have a lot of lax shoplifting laws in California, for example.
So
and what they find is we have a lot of organized retail theft because there's no consequences for it.
That's fine.
For instance,
there are people trying to make money, and they're desperate, and we have untold levels of income inequality in this country.
Well, is it income inequality or poverty?
Since the late 70s, 900%. That's the increase in CEO pay versus 12% for the working class in this country. You don't think that leads to levels of desperation?
So wait, is income inequality the cause or is poverty the cause? Because those are two different things.
I mean, they go hand in hand.
They really don't.
Yes, they do.
What? They really don't? There's no correlation whatsoever between income inequality and poverty, actually. There are many such cases of income inequality skyrocketing in a fashion which has a stark division between the ultra-wealthy and people who are simply upper middle class. That's a real thing that definitely happens in the real world.
You know, I'm watching this debate and I'm really getting a sense that there's a bit of just repeating your talking points without really understanding what you're saying. That's just the vibe that I'm getting. So this inequality versus poverty thing, I'm pretty sure Emma has heard repeatedly in her bubble this talk about inequality is bad, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. And it is. But if you don't comprehend exactly why it's bad and what people are actually talking about, and you find yourself in a debate like this, latching on to an idea that you are comfortable with without an understanding of what that idea even really means, and then you end up sounding stupid to someone who actually understands what's transpiring. So just because there's a lot of negative things attached with wealth inequality, doesn't mean you just throw it in there and like, oh, obviously it's the cause, right? You've got to qualify why it's a negative thing. What's the issue with it? So let me just get to the point. If minimum wage in the United States was $100,000 a year, once again, if minimum wage in this country was $100,000 a year, and you had, that's kind of, I'll make it even more and more extreme. Let's just say that we had some kind of a, not exactly socialist, but a hint of socialism, where everyone's getting the same amount of money. So you have at the bottom $100,000 a year, and then you have at the top of the 95% $100,000 a year. So that means the laziest person is making $100,000 a year, and the most ambitious person that is unable to break into the 5%, the top 5%, they're making the same salary as that lazy guy, right? You got this minimum wage, and I guess I shouldn't call it minimum wage because it's the wage. But anyway, so that's it. There's no middle class. It's either you're making $100,000 a year, literally, or you're in the top 5%, and then it's an average of $500 million and up. That is massive inequality. You've got 5% of the population that is taking up a ton of resources compared to the rest of the population. I mean, to have $500 million when 95% of the population are only making $100,000 a year. Now, keep in mind, in our current reality, we have a great range of incomes. And you have someone who's making $7 an hour. You got someone making $10, $20, $30, $40 an hour. You got $100 an hour, $200 an hour. So a lot of ranges there. But in my scenario, it's $100,000 a year for 95% of the population, and the rest of them $500 million and up to billionaires. That is massive wealth inequality. Somehow I'm guessing that crime is going to be extremely low in that world, because the real problem with crime, which it's interesting because she's aware of this, but for some reason she just wants to throw inequality in there because inequality bad. Doesn't really understand why it's bad. But yeah, in a world where 95% of the population is making $100,000 a year, there's not going to be a lot of crime, man. The fact that the people at the top are taking sort of selfishly a lot more for themselves than everybody else. Now, if you're like the CEO of a company, I believe you should be making more money than the lazy guy or just an average person. But $500 million, $1 billion, how much money is that extra whatever you've done worth, right? I think that in my scenario, you're going to have some really, really dedicated, hard, workers that really, really doing some really great work, and they're stuck at $100,000. That's wrong, right? That is wrong, right? Wealth inequality has some serious problems, but wealth inequality by itself is not something that's going to be dealing with a lot of crime. Poverty by itself generally is. Now, in America, because even poverty alone is not enough to necessarily have a lot of crime. In a different society, in a different culture, you can have people that are very, very poor and not have a lot of crime. I think that's a rare occurrence. Typically, crime follows poverty, but let's just say poverty is a much more stronger, sort of reasoning behind the crime. Obviously, it's not a direct correlation. It's not just simply because, hey, I'm poor, I'm going to go commit crimes. Because imagine if we had, free healthcare. Imagine if we had free housing. So imagine if everyone was provided for. You're not going to have as much crime as a place where there's a lot of poverty and people aren't being taken care of. So people are out there struggling, to find food to eat, a place to live, and they're desperate. From the desperation comes the crime, right? So it's not just the poverty, right? You can have poverty, but people are taken care of, much less crime. High poverty, people aren't being taken care of, much more crime, right? Now combine that with wealth inequality, and it makes it even worse, right? It would be better, perhaps, if everyone was struggling together than for people to be struggling and desperate and then seeing people who are just making so much more money. You don't have to go all the way up to the millionaires and billionaire class. You can just look at someone who's working really, really hard, making $7 an hour, and then you have someone who's a sales guy who does really good sales, and with their commissions, they can be making $200,000 a year, driving a nice car. That person making $7 an hour could be working, just as hard as that person, the sales guy. Maybe 14 hours, physically demanding work, and they can barely pay their rent. And there's this sales guy making $200,000 a year, and that's gonna add some sort of tension. So it's a combination of poverty with inequality that is bad, but inequality by itself is not really as much a problem as Emma is trying to present it in this situation. Because again, if 95% making $100,000 a year, that means the average person can afford nice cars, you can pay your rent, and of course it's all relative, right? If you're making $100,000 a year, 95% of the population, but the average car costs $80,000 a year, and the average rent is $3,000 a month. And then Vaush asking if actual justice warrior is working for Tim Pool. This is stuff that I just shake my head, man. I do this for free in my spare time. I'm extremely busy. I don't really have time to be doing this, but somehow I'm stupid enough to do it anyway. This guy does it for a living, sitting in his basement. He's watching a debate on what is this show called? It's Culture Wars, I think it's called, which is a new segment that Tim Cass is doing. And somehow I feel like Vaush is less informed about this show than I am. Tim Cass is in the same business that you're in, Vaush. He's your competitor, and you're sitting in front of your audience critiquing his show. Now, let's be clear, Tim Cass is a fool, he's a buffoon, he's very dishonest, very toxic, for sure. But just because of that, this is like the laziness you see online, man. Oh, so Tim Pool is, very bad actor, bad faith actor. So Vaush, I'm not a bad faith actor, this guy's trash. And Emma is in my bubble, so, look at Tim trying to say poverty doesn't matter. Just like the default, right? Don't really listen to anything that Tim says, right? Don't really be critical of anything that Emma's saying, right? Emma's in your tribe, right? Drop your guard when she speaks. Only when she says something really, really bad do you even notice. But Tim, assume everything he says is wrong. Assume everything he says is stupid. He's the beanie guy. That's not how we operate. Yes, Tim is really toxic, very dishonest. But when I listen to Tim, right? I don't just have a lazy attitude just assuming what he's saying is wrong or stupid. I know that he says a lot of stupid things, a lot of lazy things, a lot of incorrect things, but a broken clock is right twice a day. So when I listen to him, right? Usually when I listen to him, I'll hear him doing some nonsense and I call it out. But I actually listen first to see if what he's saying is problematic. And while I do that, even though I would agree much more with Emma, believe it or not, than I would with Tim, for sure. When I listen to her, I do the same thing. I listen to what she's saying, and I pay attention to see if what she's saying is correct or not. So when she's saying something incorrect, I can call it out, right? I don't drop my bar for people that are in my tribe. I'm not in a tribe, so that's kind of hard to do. And then maybe that's the whole point, right? Since I'm not in a tribe, I don't have sort of a connection with Emma and an animosity for Tim. No, I know what Tim is, I know what he's about, but that's irrelevant. What is he saying now? Is it correct or is it not correct? What is she saying now? Is it correct or is it incorrect? It's not that difficult. This is the Debate Me channel. Debate me in the comment section below. Click on the like button, subscribe, smash that bell, and be well. Oh man, so exhausted. Back in my hole with no wheels once again. What you gonna do? All right, guys, I'm out.